I'd like to introduce you all to the Fellows Air Purifier lineup, and we'll talk a little bit about the science about air purification in a second. But you may know Fellows as that company that if you look around your office, you'll probably see some Fellows products. We started back in 1917, and we make banker's boxes. So you may be familiar with our storage box line. And there's probably a pretty good chance that you potentially have a Fellows shredder in your office as well, among a lot of other products. Back in 2011, we actually introduced a new line of air purifiers. So we've been doing this for a while, over 11 years now of making air purifiers. And obviously, with the pandemic hitting us a couple years ago in 2020, there was a renewed interest in really what do we do about the air? And so we'll talk about that as we move forward through this brief presentation. Please feel free to jump in and ask a question. I also have my son, Nick Aronis, who works for us on the call, and he'll monitor if anybody raises their hand, because all I see is the presentation. Hopefully, Zach, we can see the presentation, correct?
Yes, everything looks good.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I didn't get too far down the road. So first, let me talk about where, who helped us lead us down the path in terms of the clean air conversation. And you may be familiar with some of these entities. ASHRAE is one you may or may not be familiar with, but ASHRAE is the association that the heating and ventilation folks all belong to. So they're the experts on really how to move air through any facility, whether it be an office building, a school. It doesn't matter. They're the ones who know air best. Of course, you're more than familiar with the CDC. I think the CDC's had more publicity in the last 2.5 years than any other entity in the government. But there's also some other places we've sourced valuable information, like the Lancet Commission and the Well Living Lab. And so we'll talk about COVID here, but what I'd like to do is kind of back away from COVID just ever so slightly and just talk about clean air, because we've suffered with colds and flus and other illnesses that are really either surface or airborne issues in an office. So it's really important that you understand that, although I will mention COVID quite a bit. This really does handle quite a bit more than just COVID. So keep that in mind as we're moving forward. So I'm going to play a short video. Hopefully we can hear this.
Today, more than ever, we have come to understand the impact air quality has on our overall health. In fact, the demand for air purification systems has increased at such a high rate, many manufacturers are introducing basic units with inadequate specifications. This often leads to some confusion on which products and features are reliable, trustworthy, and right for you. This is why we would like to clear the air and clarify the difference between AeraMax Pro from Fellows and other air purifiers in the market today. For example, square footage claims made by manufacturers can be quite deceptive. This is because a machine is much less effective at removing airborne contaminants if it's not purifying the air often enough. Imagine your standard shared space at roughly 650 square feet, and an individual not only happens to cough, but unknowingly has the flu. Well, an average person's cough that is infected with a flu-like virus contains over 75,000 particles. And while one system may claim to have a HEPA filter and the ability to purify up to 650 square feet, this may only be at an air exchange rate of 1 to 2 times per hour. AeraMax Pro will exchange the air 5 times per hour, removing harmful contaminants much faster. AeraMax Pro purifiers are proven to capture submicron particles including viruses, and effectively remove 99.99% of coronavirus based on independent laboratory testing. But these aren't the only differences. AeraMax from Fellows has been innovating in the air purifier market with the goal of maximum virus protection for over 10 years. With 13 patents in the category, our team of designers and engineers have developed leading technologies that do not exist anywhere else in the industry. Our proprietary and patented EnviroSmart technology utilizes an array of self-regulating sensors to proactively react to changes in room occupancy and air quality. AeraMax Pro senses occupants entering the space and immediately works to increase the air exchange rate to quickly purify the air. And as people leave, it shifts to standby mode to conserve energy and extend filter life. And PureView technology enables you to actually see it working, allowing real-time monitoring of air quality to show you the air is clean. But the AeraMax Pro difference is not just about technology. It's built to sustain heavy traffic and designed for seamless integration into the space. It can be wall-mounted for maximum productivity or on a floor stand for maximum flexibility. AeraMax Pro is vandal-resistant with a tamper-proof lock that keeps settings in place and filters secure. Needless to say, not all systems are the same. So when selecting an air purifier, avoid uncertainty and choose AeraMax Pro from Fellows, the leading air purification system that is highly effective, smart, and engineered for ultimate peace of mind.
Okay, let's see if we can move forward here. So I will give you a little more detail on what the video just explained, and it's going to center around these four pillars of what AeraMax is made up of. And so as I move forward through this, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So we'll start with what we call PureView. And PureView is actually a screen on our system. On some of our systems, we have units that don't have screens as well, that actually show the occupants of the room that the air is being cleaned, and they can see that it's being cleaned. So how does this benefit you? Well, part of the challenge we're having as we're reintegrating our employees and our people back into buildings, or even at schools with students being in the classroom, we have two things that are really a factor. And one is, are we cleaning the air and doing everything we can to help mitigate the chance of spreading of a virus or bacteria, and so on. And so that's number one. Number two is, do the people in the room think you're doing enough? So do they feel safe? And what we've, on a lot of surveys we've seen from employers who are taking employee surveys, they're actually saying, you know, I need to feel safe if I'm going to come back into the office. And so that's probably just as much of a problem as you know, any virus or bacteria that could spread. And so having something like PureView that actually shows the person in the room, you know, that the air is being cleaned. And let me unpack some of the statistics that the video gave. So first of all, for those of you who are in office buildings, our three areas that we focus in on, believe it or not, is generally not the work areas of the larger, let's say if I'm in a conference room in downtown Honolulu, sorry, in a building or a floor in downtown Honolulu, and you know, we have cubicles or bench seating or bench systems, depending on how close people are together, we may or may not put air purifiers there. But where we start to congregate people in a smaller space is really where we're hyper focused on. So that would be break rooms, conference rooms, and believe it or not, restrooms. If you control your own restrooms, you should consider this. So I don't mean the one stall restroom, I mean the multi-stall restroom. And so when you've got 2 or 3 stalls in a restroom, and if you're not limiting people going in and out, which today we've kind of stopped doing that, then at any given point, you could have 2 or 3 or 4 people in a very small space. And now the whole idea of having that shared air becomes just exponentially multiplied. So any of those places, and I also want you to think about the general conference room. And if it's a conference room that holds 10 people and maybe 100 square feet, that's a small space, or even 200 square feet. That's a small space to put a lot of people in. And again, it just increases the fear factor and increases the chance that something is going to get spread in there. And this goes way beyond COVID at this point. I mean, we've all been there. We've all been in that conference room when somebody, starts to cough, and then they admit they've got a cold, and now you're wondering whether you're going to have a cold. So the air purifier itself from Fellows can help mitigate that risk and make people feel more comfortable that it's working on their behalf. PureView's an excellent way of showing the results happening as real time. Let me move on to the really kind of the key part of our system. EnviroSmart actually has not only a sensor in the machine, but actually casts a laser throughout the wall, the room. And so most notably, when you walk into the room for the first thing in the morning, that laser is going to notice you're there, and it's going to turn the machine on and then measure to see if there's obviously any contaminants in the air. Now, folks, I hate to say this, we are the problem. When you have an empty room, there's no issues. When we start introducing people into that room, we're bringing everything with us. So the EnviroSmart technology allows us to find and search for the problem areas of the room. So let's talk about what this is looking for. It's looking for viruses. It's looking for bacteria, mold and mildew, allergens of any sort, and then any other VOCs or volatile organic compounds that can be introduced into the environment. A perfect illustration of that is when the Big Island sees an eruption and poor Oahu gets nailed with what we like to call VOG. I live in Northern California, and I frequent the Hawaiian Islands for work. But in Northern California, we've been hit with, fire season here. And I'm up in Sonoma County, so we've really been hit. And so VOCs would include VOG or smoke. So if that somehow seeps into the office building, it's also cleaning that air. And then last but not least, smells. Before COVID hit, the most popular area of placement for AeraMax was actually in the break rooms, because invariably somebody burnt the popcorn or brought something that was not that wasn't a pleasant odor for lunch, and so we've put AeraMax into those break rooms to help mitigate odors floating around outside of the break room areas. So keep that in mind as we're moving forward. EnviroSmart is proactive in finding and searching those problems, and then setting the fan speed to the appropriate level to capture those at a much faster rate than most other air purifiers. So for those more advanced air purifiers that are out in the marketplace, they will have a sensor in the machine. And so if they have a multi-speed motor, what will happen is once that problem comes to the machine senses it and then kicks the motor on. Versus what we do is with that laser spread out through the room, if something's across the room and it's introduced across the room, we recognize it, move the fan speed to turbo, fan speed 5, and it will then capture that about 8 times faster than a regular or average air purifier. There are a lot of purifiers out there for $99. I would recommend that you not consider those if you're placing in a conference room, bathroom, or in a break room, because I will tell you that it's usually just one fan speed, and you're basically getting a box that makes noise, that's doing its very best to clean the air, but unfortunately that best is not good enough to really mitigate any of the problems. I'll get into this in greater detail in the next slide or 2 slides from now, because I'm going to walk you through how this does its job. And it's really a 4-stage process to cleaning the air. And then last but not least, and there's sorry, it was the next slide. So we start with a pre-filter, and that pre-filter collects the dust and particles we actually can see. If you're in a closed window office building, you most notably see when the sun's kind of coming through, you can actually see small little particles floating around. And they're just dust particles, everyday normal dust particles that can or can not be a problem with respiratory illnesses. But that's what this filter is going to collect. And the reason why it's there is so it keeps it off the filters that are behind there, so we don't get a really dirty filter too fast. The carbon filter, ironically, is made up of crushed coconut shells, and it is actually what captures those odors and those larger VOCs like smoke. And so once that passes through the pre-filter, those things get captured right in that carbon filter, and it does an amazing job on odors. I will attest to that. I've had to put some odor control units in. There's a hotel on the mainland that actually has, unfortunately, their garbage area is right next to their lobby, and so the odors were kind of creeping out the garbage area into the lobby, and obviously was not an odor they wanted there. So they have 3 AeraMax 4s in that room, and it does a wonderful job capturing that. But let's get to the real workhorse here, and it is that True HEPA filter that is capturing 0.3 micron sized particles, and that's well within the tolerance of things like COVID-19 and a lot of other problems like H1N1 and other flu viruses that we've captured over the years, to include bacteria and mold and fungus. So that's where this is captured. But what's really important is this is treated with an antimicrobial solution. And that antimicrobial solution, if you're aware of how that works, is the particle hits the HEPA filter, and because the solution's on there, it actually, for the best way to describe it, actually puts a cocoon around that particular particle, and then that particle can't feed, and therein lies how COVID-19 dies on the filter. And it's pretty instantaneous. It hits, gets cocooned. The virus has to feed. All viruses have to feed. So if it cannot feed, they die off instantly. So that's how HEPA works with an antimicrobial treatment. I will tell you, when you're replacing these, none of this is a biohazard. Everything on these filters is dead. I would recommend that maybe you mask up because there can be some fine particles, and then just put it in a trash bag, tie it off, and then just dispose of it like your normal everyday trash. Again, no biohazard at all here. And then last but not least, we have a plasma true bipolar ionizer. And that ionizer, the way ionizers work, and you've probably heard that term before, it changes the polarity of the particles. And so as that ionizer is working, the particles are coming in and they become attracted to each other. Just like when we were in 3rd grade, when we learned about magnets, and you put a positive and a negative, and they'll connect each other very quickly. But if you turn that other magnet to a positive and you put a positive and positive together, they'll detract each other. So what we do is we actually alternate the charges on the particles, and they become larger because they connect to each other and come through the system. Now, there's about 0.1% the world's population can actually feel the ionizer. It's like a buzz to them. I've only met one person in doing this for as many years as I have who actually felt it, like a buzz. This function can be turned off. So if you have somebody who's sensitive to that, it's pretty simple through the menu options to turn the ionizer off. But that's the 4-stage filtration process. The filters last, depending on how dirty the environment is. If it's a general office, the filters are going to last about a year, and the machine tells you when to replace them. HSC has a complement of filters. They're happy to provide those to you, and we have plenty of machines here on the mainland that only take about a couple weeks to get to you over in Hawaii. So I always say this, don't take my word for it. We have independent studies that we have certified that our units do capture COVID-19. And so the HSC team has these certifications. If you need a copy, we're happy to give them to you. And I will say on a couple fronts, I'm always available if you need to talk. I have our engineers and our people who run the division in the Chicago land area. We can bring as many people to the party as you need. I most recently speak to, I speak to the building engineer a lot. I speak to the facilities managers a lot. So if we need to talk about, how you upgraded your HVAC and how MERV 13 filters have been put in place, and how do these kind of coexist with the localized air purification. We just did an install here in Northern California in Palo Alto for a company called Garden, and Garden actually was probably the cleanest facility that I've ever seen. Kevin can attest, he's been there a bunch of times. They actually upgraded their HVAC to MERV 18 filters, which is almost like surgery type rooms, surgical room filtration. But they still saw fit to put localized air purifiers in their conference rooms because people were nervous about getting, that group of people together on a regular basis in conference rooms. So they ordered 50 units and placed those 50 units in the 50 conference rooms that they have around their facility. So we have various options in terms of seamless integration. We have wall mounts, we have floor stands, and then even with our AeraMax 2, we can recess that in the wall so it's a flush mount. There's no one right or wrong way here. The floor stand and the recessed work just as well as the wall mount. It just all depends on what is best available to you. The wall mounts can either be hardwired into the electrical system. You'd need an electrician to do that. Or we now have a wall mount that actually has a plug. So you will have the cord kind of running down the wall to the plug area. But we can consult with you on placement and, which is the right version for you. They are built to last. The motor, the only moving part here is the motor, and the motor is actually made by Samsung. So one of the most premier manufacturers of electronics in the world specially makes this motor for us. Most of our units have a 5-year warranty. Some of our smaller units have 3-year warranties. But I can assure you, Fellows has been around for 100+ years. HSC has been around, I can't even remember, but a long time. We stand behind our products, and we will never leave you if something were to go sideways with a unit. I've yet to have to replace a unit, so I'm pretty excited to tell you that. And we have sold hundreds of thousands. In fact, my group alone in the West has sold $34 million worth of air purifiers in the last 2 years. So we've shipped a lot of units, and they're all in process, all in the field, and all working beautifully. There is a touch control panel on these. So the units that are not mounted to the wall, a user can actually, change the ionization, do some other things. But generally, these are plug, turn on, and let them do their jobs. There is no maintenance to these other than replacing the filters. The units could get a little dusty inside, but very rarely do you see that as long as you're changing the filters on the regular basis or when the unit tells you. This is just like your water and ice filter in the door of your refrigerator if you have one of those at home. At some point in time, the door tells you, hey, replace the filter. So our unit does the exact same thing. You saw all this. Quietness. I want to talk about the sound of these. I had the luxury of placing our AeraMax 4s, which are a little larger than this. You'll see this in a second, in the Sonoma County court system. And 2 of the judges were very, very concerned about sound. So we did some testing. And a courtroom generally is a pretty quiet place. We put 2 AeraMax 4 units in each of the courtrooms, and the judges gave a thumbs up to really not being able to hear the units at all. And I had actually brought in some hand sanitizer to make sure we got this up to that turbo mode at fan speed 5, and it passed with flying colors. The decibels, which are going to sound very loud, the decibels max is about 68 decibels, which is about the same sound as your air conditioner. So could you hear it if you were right next to it? Yes. But it is going to be no louder than the air conditioning in the building. And I have yet to have anybody have a problem with the sound of these. They are built to last. This is some reinforced plastic molding. Our demo units have been kicked around, dropped, all kinds of stuff, and the units still work amazingly well. Let me move on here. This kind of goes back to the conversation about your HVAC and hey, did we do enough to, when we upgraded our HVAC? I will tell you, there's a lot of information about this. Harvard produced a study. There are 4 things you really have to do, and I'm happy to send that to the HSC team, and they can send it out to you as a follow-up. Harvard really listed, HVAC, the introduction of outside air, which is very tough when you're in an office building. Let's see, maybe improving the filtration on that HVAC to a MERV 13. For those of you who do not know MERV ratings, think about when you have to replace the filter at your house. You run down to Home Depot or to Lowe's, you walk in their filter area, and you've got a 22x17 filter, and all you're trying to do is find the right size. I know that's what I do. And what you see is one that's about $18, you see one that's about $27, and then you see one that's $40. What that is just more fiber put into the filters. So the more fiber, the more expensive they are. And so, and obviously with the more fiber in that filter, the better filtration you have. So the ASHRAE people actually developed a MERV rating, and that MERV rating starts at level 1 and works all the way up to 20 plus. The typical hospital, so if you go to Queens, the typical hospital starts out at MERV rating 13. The HEPA filter in our unit doesn't carry a MERV rating because it's a HEPA filter. But if I had to equate a MERV rating, it'd be MERV 15. So you're getting a pretty powerful filtration. And so even if you upgraded your HVAC, most building HVAC only has 2 air changes in the room in an hour. And this is the big deal about air filters, is how many air changes. You saw the video and it started out by talking about air changes. And so if your HVAC is only cleaning the air every 30 minutes at 2 air changes per hour, then there's a lot more likelihood that those contaminants in the air are going to be there for at least 30 minutes before they're captured. The standard air purifier from Fellows will have about 5 air changes per hour. That's why in this case size matters. You know, we evaluate the rooms you're putting this in, and we tell you, you know, this is the appropriate size unit to actually clean the air 5 times an hour. And so that's the CDC recommends 3 times an hour. We go a little further and try to clean the air 5 times an hour to help mitigate any of those potential bad things floating around in that air. Let me talk about the lineup. This is a brand new unit. This is called the AeraMax Pro 4 Flex. So for those of you who don't necessarily think they need an air purifier in every room all the time, but have, you know, conferences and want to help mitigate, you know, the potential of putting a lot of people together, this is a nice one because it's on a stand with wheels. It has 1 plug. You plug it into the wall, and you're going to get up to 5 air changes per hour at 2,250 square feet. That is a pretty large room, by the way, and does carry a 5-year warranty. Really, the workhorse of our line has been the AeraMax 4 on the left. And that AeraMax 4, the reason why it's been the workhorse is because we placed a lot of these in schools across the country. And so this was the unit that got 5 air changes per hour at about 900 square feet, which is the average classroom size. We literally have placed thousands of these in the West. And so this has been a hit. By the way, if you want to kind of gauge the size of that, that's kind of like a large carry-on suitcase, but a carry-on, not a checked bag. So it gives you an idea how big this is. Half the size is the AeraMax 3. Again, and this is just a square footage play. And then we move down to the 2. We also have a wonderful lineup of smaller units to handle those smaller room sizes. So if you have a conference room that accommodates 4 people, you don't need the overkill of a Pro unit. You can bring in our standard units, and you can see the size required. So we really do have the right sized unit for the application. And most importantly, we have the right sized unit that actually can fit your budget. So it's not necessarily always trying to get you into the biggest unit. It's to get you into the right unit that fits your application. Folks, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it. We went a little long, which happens. And again, if you have any further questions, feel free to send the HSC team those questions, and I'll get those answered for you right away. Again, thank you. Aloha. Thanks for your time. Have a wonderful day, and we're ramping up to the weekend, so have a nice weekend as well.